Welcome to You're Not Crazy, a podcast for cycle breakers with toxic parents. I'm your host, Torie Wiksell, a therapist and boundaries coach with over a decade of experience in the mental health field. Welcome back to another episode of the You're Not Crazy podcast. I am thrilled for you to join me today. The holidays are here. We are in full holiday mode, and I know that as we get closer to the holidays, to the main events of this holiday season, it can be extremely stressful when you have a complicated family situation. And so, over the next couple of weeks, as we move through the holidays, I want to talk more and more about some of those really common stressors that come up and what my thoughts are on how you might be able to navigate the holidays with a bit more ease. As a quick reminder, make sure to check the show notes for the link to my holiday workbook, Surviving the Holidays with a Toxic Parent. It's 19 pages, it is downloadable, and it is only $9. It definitely expands upon actionable steps that you can take this holiday season to navigate things a bit more confidently. Okay, let's talk about drowning in guilt at the holidays. Guilt comes up so much all the time, every day, pretty much when you're a cycle breaker. And it doesn't matter if you are in contact with your toxic parent, if you're no contact, if you're low contact, if you're not exactly sure what your relationship dynamic is right now. Guilt is really challenging when you have a toxic family dynamic because of the kind of guilt that us cycle breakers feel. Let's take a step back really fast and talk about the kind of guilt that we feel when we feel guilty for saying no to our parents, for shortening the amount of time that we're going to spend with them. That guilt is so heavy, it is so intense, and it feels like we are going to drown in a sea of it, that it is just too unbearable to deal with. And that guilt is extremely motivating when it comes to getting us to do things that we don't actually want to do. That guilt comes up and is so hard to manage. It is so overwhelming. That guilt that I'm talking about is not normal, healthy guilt. Normal, healthy guilt is what comes up for us when we behave in a way that violates our personal value system. Normal, healthy guilt is like an alarm bell that goes off that says, ding, 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 hey, pay attention. Something didn't really pan out how it was supposed to. And we need to kind of take inventory of what is actually going on here and why we behaved in a way that isn't aligned with the person that we see ourselves as. Healthy guilt is healthy. It is normal. It is productive. It helps us learn from our mistakes. It helps us grow as a person. Healthy guilt is a good thing. It's a productive thing. It's still a tough emotion to sit with, but it's a helpful one. Now let's talk about the guilt that us cycle breakers experience. Let's talk about the guilt that feels like you are going to drown in it, that it is too overwhelming, too uncomfortable, too distressing to even think about tolerating. That is the guilt that you grow up with when you grow up with a toxic parent. That guilt is all about manipulation. That is a toxic guilt. That is not healthy guilt. That is guilt that you have been trained to feel throughout your life by your parent in order to motivate you to do the things that they want you to do. That type of guilt is what ramps up majorly at the holiday for us cycle breakers. That type of guilt tells us you're a bad person for letting your parents down. You're not a kind human. That type of guilt is the worst type of guilt that you could possibly feel because it makes us question whether we're actually good people or not. It makes us feel like I might be a really, really bad person. I might be a mean person. I might be a person who is punishing. I might be a person who is doing things that don't align with my personal value system. And that feels awful because growing up with a toxic parent, the one thing us cycle breakers know so early on is that we don't want to make other people feel how we have felt our entire lives growing up in that dysfunction. We don't want to make other people feel afraid or sad. We don't want to make people that we care about feel anything that is negative. We want to protect the people that we care about. We want people we care about to feel loved and to know that we love them. And when that toxic, manipulative guilt comes up, it makes us question everything that we're doing, all of the choices that we're making, because that guilt seems like it's the same as healthy guilt. Remember healthy guilt, the one that brings your attention to the fact that you've done something that doesn't align with your personal value system. It makes you take a step back and really break down how this happened, what you can do differently moving forward. That manipulative guilt, it triggers all of those same thoughts. It triggers all of the same thoughts that healthy guilt triggers, except it's not supposed to be there. Manipulative guilt is only there to get you to override your own decision making, to override your consent, to override the things that you actually think and feel, and to get you to do what your parent wants you to do. That is the only purpose of this type of manipulative guilt. It is to get you, to motivate you to put your own needs, feelings, thoughts, whatever aside and do what's going to make your parent happy or at least less upset. That is the purpose of manipulative guilt. And the way that it accomplishes that, how it's so effective at doing that, is that it triggers those same thoughts and feelings that come up with healthy guilt. It feels the same because it's also guilt. It physically feels the same in our body, except it typically feels more intense in our bodies. This type of manipulative guilt, it triggers those feelings of you're a bad person, you're selfish, you don't care, you're a cold person, you're heartless, you're whatever, fill in the blanks. That type of guilt is just so debilitating because of that road that we go down. It's so debilitating because it's so confusing when it happens. And our brains don't realize that this is a different kind of guilt, that this is a manipulative guilt. Manipulative guilt is really minimized by society in general. I grew up Catholic in a Catholic family, and the amount of times I've heard the phrase Catholic guilt thrown around lightheartedly as people were actively manipulating other people in my family is like more times than I can count. These types of things are really minimized by society, but they are not insignificant things. So, what do you do about it though? You've identified, okay, this is manipulative guilt. Maybe you already have that awareness that this is not healthy guilt. This is your parent, the years and years and decades of manipulation and conditioning that they've done to get you to do what they want you to do, despite the fact that that might not be what's in your best interest at all. And you might have awareness of all of this, but awareness alone doesn't change the way that it feels in our bodies. It doesn't change the fact that when this gets triggered internally, it feels like we're going to die. It feels like we're going to drown. It feels like there is no world in which you could survive choosing something that would make that guilt last longer or feel more intense. That's the power of manipulative guilt. That's the part that we don't spend enough time talking about and dealing with is the reaction that we have in our bodies when this gets triggered. Because ultimately, that's the trauma. That's the trauma response. That's the part that is so hard to deal with. Awareness is a huge first step. If you're not aware, obviously you're not going to be able to do anything to change it. But that in and of itself does not help you change anything. In fact, in a lot of ways, having awareness without knowing how to handle what's happening can make you feel even more helpless. It can make you feel even more hopeless because all of a sudden you're now aware of the super toxic cycle, and yet you still feel like it's impossible to do anything about. You still feel like it's impossible to deal with, that there is no world in which you can possibly overcome this, where you could possibly do the healthy thing for yourself if it triggers this level of guilt. And that can make you feel like there is no light at the end of the tunnel. There is no end of the tunnel, that this is just a miserable road that's going to go on and on forever. And I think that these are the aspects of cycle breaking that are so nuanced, and where people get really stuck, and where they shut down, and where they dissociate, and where they avoid, and where they say, I can't deal with this. I know what's happening here, and I'm not strong enough to deal with it. I don't push myself hard enough. I know better. I should be doing better. I know what I should be doing, but I can't do it. These are the parts of breaking the cycle that people get so trapped in, that people get so lost with, because it does feel like you know enough. It feels like you have all the information that you need, and that it is a personal failure. And it feels like, because you can't overcome this, you're constantly either in this land of dissociation and avoidance, or you are consumed with and overwhelmed by the guilt. And no one wants to be stuck in either of those places. And so, when we're talking about this type of guilt, again, which gets triggered so profoundly at the holidays, whether it's you declining to hang out with your family, to go to a family event, whether it's you putting boundaries around the amount of time that you're going to spend there, whether it is around you putting boundaries around the things that you're going to discuss with your family, this guilt gets triggered so much at the holidays. Hop over to confidentboundaries.com and grab my new free guide, 5 Signs You Were Gaslit by Your Parent. Inside, I break down 5 of the most common signs of gaslighting by a toxic parent, so you can stop questioning yourself and get clarity on what gaslighting looks like in these types of family dynamics. Let's dive into what you're actually going to do, what you actually can do about dealing with it in a way that is healthy and productive, and allows you to see that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. First, I want to say that uncomfortable emotions, challenging emotions in general, are challenging. They are hard. There is not a point in our cycle breaking journey where it is pleasant or easy to sit with feelings like guilt. That's not an end goal that any of us get to. And if anyone is telling you that they have gotten to that place, then they are flat out lying to you, or they're in denial themselves, because that's not a thing. These emotions are challenging, they're hard, they're tricky to deal with. But there is a place that you can get in your cycle breaking journey where you are not afraid of them, where you are not making decisions in order to avoid feeling them, because you have the confidence to know that you are capable of handling these feelings without avoiding or dissociating. That is very possible. That does happen with practice and with skill and with mastery. These things take time and they take practice, but you can get to a point in your healing journey where you don't make decisions purely based on the fact that you don't think you can survive feeling uncomfortable emotions. And that is a really important distinction there. So, how do you get to that place though? The first thing that I really, really encourage you to do is to name your emotions. When you feel those really uncomfortable things in your body, it is so important and so helpful to put a name to it. Now, us cycle breakers aren't great at identifying our own emotions. That's like a journey in and of itself that we can talk about a different day. But if you are struggling to identify and put a word to that uncomfortable emotion that is coming up for you, but you feel it in your body and you know exactly what I'm talking about. That, like, whatever it is for you, the chest tightening, the shoulders rolling in, the stomach like dropping, whatever it is that your body feels when this gets triggered. If you feel that and you can't put a name to it because you are just so disconnected from your own emotions, I want you to do a quick Google search. Just take out your phone, open up your computer, and just search for emotion identification chart. There'll be a bunch of pictures that come up with like happy face emojis on them with a bunch of emotion words. That's all you need. It's all you need is just a few visual cues and reminders of what emotions you might be feeling. And oftentimes we're feeling more than one emotion. But when you have that sinking feeling in your body, it is so important to name it, to identify this is what's happening. And when that sinking feeling is guilt, when you feel so guilty, like you are going to drown in that guilt, I want you to start naming when that guilt is helpful guilt and when that guilt is manipulative guilt. Because manipulative guilt we are going to deal with differently than helpful guilt. We don't engage with manipulative guilt. We don't have conversations in our brains with. We don't debate whether or not we're a good person or not with manipulative guilt because manipulative guilt isn't about that. It's never about that. It is about trying to get you to override your emotions. And one of the ways that manipulative guilt is so effective at doing that is by trying to engage with your thoughts, trying to get you to go down that rabbit hole of debating whether or not you're a good person, whether or not this is valid, whether or not you have a right to make the decision that you're making or that you want to make or that you have already made. And going down that rabbit hole helps no one ever in these situations. It really, really doesn't. Now, when you're out of the emotion, when you're feeling like you again, when you're feeling stable and safe and calm, if you want to do some reflection, that's fine. But when you're in the heat of it, when you feel like you are going to die and drown in that guilt, that is not the time to debate or reflect. If this is manipulative guilt, the thing that we have to do is we have to name it. We have to identify why it is happening. This is happening because my mom doesn't know how to regulate her own emotions. This is happening because my dad doesn't want to deal with my mom's blowback. This is happening because my mom doesn't want my dad to get angry. My mom is an enabling parent who is putting pressure on me. This is happening for you fill in the blank with your situation and your family dynamic. This is a manipulative, and this is happening because of this. When you can start practicing that, when you can start labeling it and saying it to yourself, you are going to be far more capable of sitting with that uncomfortable guilt. Naming it in your body. I feel like my chest is caving in. I feel like my shoulders are going to like disappear into my ears. I feel like my stomach is going to like fall into a black hole. This is so uncomfortable and hard for me. And I am capable of sitting with these things. I am capable of feeling uncomfortable. I am capable of feeling upset. I am capable of feeling these things. The emotion itself is not dangerous when you have built a life that you're actually safe in. When you have a home that you're actually safe in, when you have a partner that you're actually safe with, when you have friends that you're actually safe with, you don't have to dissociate from that in order to override your emotions and manage the situation. That's something we have to do when we're growing up in a toxic family dynamic. But when we're adults, when we're in a place where we have some level of our own independence, we don't have to keep doing that. It feels like we do, but we don't. We can take the space to allow our emotions to exist, to pass. We can take the space to label our emotions and stop taking ownership for this thing that we've been conditioned to feel. When we've established some level of independence, we have far more ability to break the cycle and to do different things. We just have to learn how. And by no means do I think you're going to walk away from this episode like an expert in sitting with your emotions. That would be a delusional expectation for me to have of you. But I hope that you do walk away from this episode with a few ideas of things that you can do differently. And I hope that you walk away from this episode with a few different thoughts about how stuck you are and what the actual nuance is here and where the light at the end of the tunnel actually comes from. I hope you walk away from this episode feeling like navigating guilt is not as hopeless as it was when you first started this episode. And if you want an actual guided plan to navigate your holiday situation with your toxic family this year, make sure to grab my holiday guide. You can get it at confidentboundaries.com/holiday guide, all one word, or check the show notes for the link. I want you to have a successful holiday season this year. I want you to feel empowered to make changes that you want to make. I want you to take back control. This year, it's not hopeless. Things absolutely can get better. It is not magic, but it is complicated and it's nuanced. And I so appreciate you allowing me once again to help share some of the things that might help your holiday season to be a bit more enjoyable this year. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me for one more week of the You're Not Crazy podcast. If you like the show, please share it with a friend. Make sure to leave a comment, leave a review. It helps other cycle breakers find our show. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you soon. Thanks so much for joining me for another episode of You're Not Crazy. Please make sure to rate the podcast 5 stars and leave a comment. It helps so much. Thanks again for joining me. I'll see you next week.